Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for this topic, the science of getting unstuck.
Yeah.
Erica and I are really excited to be in conversation with all of you. I think there's maybe still a few phones that are not on mute, so if you can put yourself on mute, that would be great. We are recording, and that will be available to you later. First of all, 2020, right? I mean, it's a year. And there are lots of different ways that we can think about being stuck, both physically and mentally, emotionally. And I first just want to say, wherever you are tonight, just give yourself a lot of grace. It has been a year that is like no other, and a lot of disappointments and a lot of unexpected events. And tonight, we're hoping that we can help you lift that veil of judgment and that veil of perfection that sometimes work in opposite of what we desire and keep us stuck. We also hope that we can give you some really practical tips that bring you closer to awareness when you're in a place of feeling stuck, and action to help you move through that process. And, more than anything, being stuck is really normal. I mean, it's part of life. I love the topic because I'm always stuck. I've been stuck a lot in my life. And so we are here without judgment. We want to have some fun. We want to have some real conversation. It's a little bit different of a format. So just to know what to expect tonight, there's two of us co-hosting, both Erica and myself. I will be asking Erica first of all, and she will talk a little bit about her journey and also tell us about the science. Erica is a physician who spent 9 years in medical school and 9 years being a physician, and we'll dive into her journey, which is very interesting. And then we'll flip the tables and she'll interview me, and we'll talk a little bit about my business and personal journey and some of my opportunities in that place of being stuck. And then lastly, again, we'll open it up for questions and make sure that we're empowering you with some building blocks to walk away tonight, feeling like you have awareness and ability in those moments when sometimes you might be feeling stuck. So with that, Erica, I'm gonna let you kick off.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roesch, and I'm so excited to be here. As Monica mentioned, this is a night of transformation, of doing stuff. We are making change, even just being here in the commitment of showing up, making time for yourself and honoring that. And so in that light, we wanted to kick off with a little bit of a question for everyone. So take a deep breath, let yourself just settle in for a minute. And I want you to call upon the first thing that comes to your mind. If you want to put it in the chat, that's wonderful. If you want to write it down, that's wonderful, but you got to do something. You can't do nothing right now. So the question I want you to ponder is, what is the opposite of being stuck? And we'd love for you to share your thoughts, your answers in the chat. I see thriving, being free, freedom, right? Freedom, liberated, empowered, movement. These are all very amazing, powerful.
Flow, comfortable in my body. Oh, I love that. Juicy.
Flourishing. Oh, flourishing. That's a good one.
Fulfilled, focused.
Wow. Free and happy, right? So let that feeling just settle in with you for a minute as we start our discussion, and we'll come back to that. Keep putting your answers in the chat, keep declaring, keep letting us know what comes to mind. But we just wanted to kind of set the tone here because as you'll find throughout Monica and I's journeys and in our conversation, this will all come back as a very powerful declaration you've just done for yourself. So I'll turn it over to you, Monica.
Thanks, Erica. So let's start with the first question. Might be a little bit obvious, but you share an example or a time.
It's So
Sorry, I think I got muted there. Can you share about a time when you were stuck? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, how about this? As you said, I mean, if you talked to me last week, I was stuck. So I think it's something that happens to us all the time. But I'd like to share what it felt like to be stuck and not know that I could get out. And that was when I was in my medical practice, and I had 3 young children. And every day I woke up at 3:30 in the morning to do work before I went into work. I went to work, never feeling like I got anything done enough, trying to put pieces and parts together so that I could run out the door to make it home in time, and inevitably walking into dinner with kids at the table and my husband looking at me like, you're late again. Only to have the voice in the back of my head say to me, you can't sit here too long. You got to get moving. There's stuff to do, and get back on the computer again in the evening. And I think that the piece that really, really felt stuck was that there was no end in sight, because every day was like that. That to me, as you can even tell in my face, was stuck.
And I'm sure people on the phone, regardless of what their profession is, can relate to that feeling of never having enough time, never being present enough for the people that we want to be, and really probably last in line was ourself, right? So how did you sustain this pattern for almost 10 years?
You know, I think before I can answer that question, I think we have to honor that that pattern served me really well. That pattern got me through med school, got me through residency, helped me create a thriving practice, helped me pull call in the middle of the night. So that pattern served a great purpose in my life. And I think the thing that sustains any of us when we're in a pattern like that is the external reward we get for being in that pattern, right? I was resident of the year. I had the highest satisfaction scores, right? I had patients say, we love you. I had colleagues who would call me all the time, right? You get reward for being in the pattern. So it fills this hit, right? This dopamine hit that keeps that cycle going, that you want that edge all the time.
So dig into that a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about the science of what's happening when you're in that cyclical pattern, that treadmill, if you will.
So just to break it down, if we take things at base layer, very simply, it comes down to a couple things. We have thoughts in our mind, sentences, right? And those sentences release neurochemicals in our brain that filter into our body and cause a vibration, which we label as a feeling. And in that feeling, in that vibration, we do things in the world. And the way we conduct ourselves, the way we show up, the actions we take create our life, our results in our world. So the thing that I think we have to honor then is that our body gets conditioned to that. Our physical body gets conditioned to those neurochemicals. And when you are like me and you're a high achiever, and being in what I like to call the grind gets you those external rewards, you now reward your body, right, for this feeling, this state of being in which I lived in such a high energy drive. I always like to call it the hamster wheel kind of state. And my body was conditioned to it because it's what it knew. It was familiar. It's really all it knew. I mean, honestly, I probably fell into that pattern in my 20s, and it became my everyday way of life. I knew nothing different.
And why does your body crave, or your mind crave, what it knows, what is familiar? I want to key into that word you just said. I think it's important.
So again, there's very simply, there's 2 main parts of our brain. If we just go to the basic layer here, we have the survival piece of our brain, our brainstem. That's what makes us animals, a species. And then we have our prefrontal cortex, which is what makes us a human, which is our imaginative thought, our creativity, our ability to be emotionally connected to things. When you are in a heightened state like I was in the grind, you are literally living in survival mode every day, which means you're relying on your primitive primal brain. And that part of our brain has one objective and one objective only, to keep you alive. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but it really is primitive. It was built and engineered for us thousands of years ago, and it still exists today. And it actually dominates our world, our life, the way we show up, if we are only living in survival mode. So to the survival-based brain, the primitive brain, familiar means I'm alive. My brain knew that I would keep going, that I would be alive if I just kept all this up, right? It loves to, and it craves that familiar state of being because it knows that it's safe. I've proven it's safe. Every morning I wake up, I make it through the day, I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning. So to my brain, it was pure safety.
So what got you out of that place?
I got to the place where I knew I wanted something different, and I had this deep inner pull to something different. And frankly, I didn't know how to get there or what to do. Looking back now on my journey, it's kind of interesting because I can, you can play Monday morning quarterback and look back and see what happened. But I now know what I truly did, not realizing what I did. I started doing the things that gave me tiny fraction of moments of freedom, of thriving, of being alive, right? All the things that we listed in the chat. I didn't realize that was what I was doing. So for me, that was, I leaned into and I started doing 5 minutes of yoga every day at 3:30 in the morning. It wasn't much. It wasn't the 30 minutes that I was recommending to my patients every day, but that 5 minutes started to build and rewire my brain in a new way. Because you have to remember, the pattern of survival and the neurons that are connected in survival mode are very strong. I practiced, I laid that hardware, I lived that hardware for years. So there's a very, very strong pathway in my brain. And so I started inadvertently laying down a new road, a new pathway in my brain. And now the key piece about looking back on it was what I really started to do was I started to do all the things that came after someday. And it brings tears to my eyes because I would say to my staff, someday when I have my practice, we're all going to be doing yoga together in the morning before we start seeing patients. Someday we're going to go outside and eat lunch, right? Someday I'm going to have a candle in my office because in hospitals you can't burn candles, right? Like these little tiny things that came after someday. And what I realize now looking back is what came after someday was the opposite of being stuck for me. And I just started slowly trusting and leaning into it. And it was tiny at first. I mean, it was tiny. And it just started to build and build and build. And that's how I've got here today.
So thank you, first of all, for your vulnerability and sharing and just openness about your journey. I want to go back to the science for a minute that you talked about. So what if I heard you correctly, what you're saying is that there's two parts of our brain, and when we're in survival mode, what our brain is telling us is stay safe, stay alive, stay safe. And in order to do that, it's focusing on what it knows, what is familiar. So if you have patterns that you called hardwired, right, that are, what you know, what your body and brain function knows, even though it might be exhausting, even though it's not pursuing a dream, even though it's not doing the things that your heart or soul might aspire to, your body is just responding to that chemical acknowledgement of what it knows and staying safe. So even though you were stuck, it wasn't like your body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, right? It was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. And I think that's an important point, because I think sometimes when we understand the why, it helps us remove that layer of judgment and that self-talk that can be, why am I still here? Why am I not doing all the things I said I would do? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
For me, when that knowledge, I'm a physician. And when I didn't realize that I didn't put that together, even though I had took neuroanatomy, I had, dissected the whole 9 yards, right? But that piece of the puzzle, when those dots were connected for me, that's when my life totally changed. Because now I could see, right? That one connection allows us as humans to gain awareness to what's going on. And when we have awareness, we are no longer stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We are no longer stuck, because now you can see the pattern for what it is. Now you can be able to look at it, at an arm's length in front of you and just see it, as software. I always like to think about it. All that pattern is if some computer programmer spit out pages and pages of code. That's all that is. And a computer programmer can go back in there and change all that code, which means we as humans have the ability to go back in and change all of the wiring, all of the patterning if we want to. That piece of the puzzle is a game changer when you let that sink in. And it gives you, before, when we're in survival mode, we have no power in our own mind, right? We don't believe that we have power to change anything. But when you're able to realize this is just my primal brain doing what it was programmed to do and doing a really good job. I'm safe. I'm alive.
You were a superstar at that, primal brain.
Totally. Then you can really allow yourself to have some grace and compassion, and then to start saying, okay, so if I know that, that means I can create what I want and how I want to live. And that shift is what changed things for me.
So, question for you from the chat, really good question. It says, identifying the repetition or pattern, then making small incremental steps to grow. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, we all have patterns.
Right.
We all have patterns that are conditioned. Some of them are from work experience, life experience, familiar, all of those types of things, right? So some of them serve us. Some of them we don't want to let go. But I think when we're able to kind of take a step back and have that awareness, you can objectively look at the pattern and decide, is it serving me? Do I like it? Is pieces and parts of it serving me? Or do I want to change it? And so then when we talk about the incremental steps, I think that word and that phrase is a very, very grounded phrase to use, because this doesn't go from I'm Erica of here to Erica of here overnight, right? Because if we talk about what's going on in the brain, the connections of the neurons of our patterns that we've practiced and we've solidified for so many years are really strong. Yep. And the brain loves to be efficient. And its whole job in survival is to expend the least amount of energy possible to do its job, right? In a survival situation, you conserve energy, you conserve calories. The brain does that. The primal brain does that on a daily basis. So it's naturally always going to choose the patterns that are the most efficient, the quickest, the fastest, which are our most practiced patterns. Maybe not the ones that we think serve us the most, right? Just our most practiced patterns. So the incremental change piece happens when we start making new decisions. We start showing up in a different way. Maybe we start saying no to something and we lay down new connections of those neurons. The way I like to describe it is, you start off clearing a forest, and then you have a dirt road, and then you have a gravel road, and then you have a 2-lane road, a 4-lane road, and then finally you're on a highway. And once that highway becomes a super highway, it now outcompetes in efficiency the old programming. And that's the incremental change that then creates that new pattern that you design for yourself.
Right. And I think some of the comments, and then we'll flip here, are around, just small steps, baby steps, we sometimes call them, right? Small steps. Mm-hmm. And letting go, Jane wrote, letting go of fear and doubt and replacing it with wow, wisdom, optimism, and wonder. I love that. And so it's switching out old from new. And again, we might think, okay, well, that's so simple. Then why is it just happening? And I think what you're saying is the patterns have been in play for a long time. And so it's going to take time and practice and incremental progress and a lot of celebrating the wins along the way, right?
Yeah. That piece of celebration is also key. If I can talk about that for 1 second. What allows the brain to gain momentum is where you now show the brain evidence that that new pathway is working. So when we celebrate something, we're giving evidence to our brain that, hey, this new pathway is a good one. Let's make this stronger. Let's make this stronger and faster. So that key of celebration is a very pivotal one in being able to create, and breaking one pattern to change to another one, is celebrating all those tiny small steps along the way.
Yep. And Julie has a good question, which I think is a good transition for us, where she asks about, isn't there a lot of outside influence and acceptance of others? Wow. I don't know why that sounds familiar to me.
Well, on that note, because Julie is way ahead of the game here, but this is where I want to take over because I love your story. And although we come from different parts of the country and different industries and different backgrounds, your story deeply resonates with me. And so I want to ask you, if you don't mind, sharing a story about a time when you felt stuck.
Yeah, and I again, as I said earlier, I feel like there are so many to draw from, but I'm going to share a story about probably one of the most challenging times in my life. And I'm going to call it a date. And I remember it specifically, it was November 1st, 2008. And we were in the midst of a financial crisis as a country, if that sounds familiar. I was going through a divorce. I was living in Southern California and recognizing that as the sole financial and physical provider for my two young sons at the time, that I was going to have to let go of my home. That was a tough decision. And the reason I remember November 1st is I walked into Target with a bag of Halloween candy and returned it because that $4 meant that much to me. And what was really hard, and the reason I'm sharing this story, is that I was showing up every day working in the financial services industry, selling to executives at banks how to make risk decisions and evaluate consumers. And I felt like such a fraud and such a failure in my life. And I felt really stuck.
Tell me what that felt like in your body. Can you describe that for me?
Even telling it taking me back to that moment in time, it feels shaky, but it did manifest in my body. That's a good question, Erica, because I had a lot of physical pain, a lot of illness, a lot of sleeplessness. It was a tough time for me physically, but more than anything, it was just that angst of feeling like, how I am trying to present myself to the world and what is really happening in my life isn't one and the same. And how did I get to this place? And how do I possibly get out of it?
Mm-hmm. So when did it come to you, or how did you figure out that you were stuck? Like that you were truly stuck?
Well, I think kind of like you said, you get to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And you start to take inventory of what's happening. And I luckily have always been somebody who's curious and a student of change. And so I started to read, enlist the help of coaches, create mantras, just really invest in myself and my learning and awareness. And one of the things that became evident to me really quickly in that process was I started to explore, and this is where Julie's question comes in, the voices in my head. And I realized that the voices in my head weren't mine. Why am I listening to this audience of people instead of listening to myself and my truth and knowing what it is that is important to me and what I want and need to create a life that is worthwhile for me, that I can create.
So, can you be a little specific in how that showed up in your daily life? For example, those voices at work, at home. Can you give us some examples of how that shows up?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is, it is so easy to just recycle the same voices over and over, because back to what you said about the brain, we gravitate to the stories that are familiar. And I think sometimes, to some extent, at least I did, I gravitated to excuses. Of course, I'm getting divorced in a financial crisis. Of course, this is happening to me. This is happening to me. And what I realized is, when I shifted and started to take ownership for what I had created, and started to own some of my money story as well, and started to make decisions. I think making a decision is one of the most important things you can do. I just made a decision. Okay, I'm going to become debt free. And here's how I'm going to do it. And I started breaking it down. And I did, independent of anyone, become debt free. So I think making that decision was important. Being a student was super important, knowing that obviously if I was the expert, I wouldn't be in the place I was at. And so looking for resources and being willing to let go of some of my ego and pride. I think the other thing I started to do was change the individuals I surrounded myself with, and really recognizing what friendship looked like, what partnership looked like, what family looked like, and really saying, recognizing that I was creating the average by the events, the people, and the choices. And if I wanted a different average, then I needed to be part of that change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, from my perspective, what I hear you saying is you laid new hardwiring, right? Each time you chose to not follow your default survival patterning, right? Of just recycling the old thoughts, going through the excuses. Each time you chose that and you made a decision for you, you laid new connections in your brain. You laid new hardwiring. You created a new pathway. And so I think we just need to honor the power of, like you said, like the one decision. And then there's another one decision, another one decision. So as you were doing that, tell me what started to happen in your life.
I think a couple things. The other thing is, I do think I had the benefit of drawing an important element from my sales career, which was, you rarely reap the benefits in the same cycle that you sow, right? There's a period of sowing and there's a period of reaping, and it's a process and it's a journey. So I did not set unrealistic expectations for myself around how I was going to manage my finances, how I was going to manage my life, how I was going to manage my decisions. I did chunk it out, sometimes by week, sometimes by month, sometimes by quarter. And I made conscious decisions. I wrote them down. I found people I could be accountable to in the form of mastermind groups, which you and I know well. I hired an amazing coach who's on the phone, Leah, and I would show up and say, a year from now, I'm not going to recognize my life. And I just chose to embrace a version of me that I saw coming. And it was a long journey, but a worthwhile journey. And I'm still on that journey. Work is never done, right? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, because it's really, we have a very common ground in that you embraced what you really wanted, which, in my version was the someday, right? And your version is a year from now, I won't recognize my life. And really anchoring in to that piece. So when you say the words, a year from now, I won't recognize my life, do you feel stuck?
No. No.
What do you feel?
I feel excited to see what's next. I feel excited to see what's next.
Right?
And I don't want to discount that it is a really hard time and that we all go through really challenging times, and it's okay to feel whatever it is you're feeling. And I think what this journey so far has taught me is the importance of just recognizing that there are moments in time, there are cycles in time, and that it's not forever. It's not forever, because we can be a pathway for that change.
So the science behind what you're saying, though, just to outline that for 1 second, is that that statement for you, a year from now, I won't recognize my life, took you right out of survival mode, right? It dropped you out of your primal brain from working and let you tap into all of your imagination, your creative thought, all of those resources, years of knowledge, sales experience. The tunnel vision was suddenly gone. And I could just tell by your body language when you said it's exciting, like the opportunities that existed from that place of thinking, from letting survival mode kind of melt away, even if it was for just brief periods of time at first, right?
Right, brief periods of time. Agree.
That is, that's flow. That's tapping into flow, into that creative thought. And from that place, you laid new patterns. So,
and Erica, if I can, I think that is an important topic, the topic of flow. And similar to your story, I could relate to that feeling of grind. And I think we are all in some degree members of the Overachievers Anonymous. We like the recognition, as you said, we're rewarded for that. We think we can grind and just continue to show up and put others first and ourselves last. And that's probably a familiar pattern for most of us. And as you pointed out, it can serve us. But I think we all also have those moments when we recognize, are we going against the current or are we going with the current? And if we're honest with ourselves and we sit in how our body feels, like when we get that tightness in our chest or we kind of have that looseness in our spirit, start paying attention to your body, right? Can you expand on that a little bit more from a science perspective?
well, if we go back to the original point where what we think determines how our body feels, when you're not in survival mode and you're thinking, a year from now, my life won't look the same, your body is in a different vibration. There's different chemicals being released from your brain. So it's this place where you can lean into that state of being that really gets you into that free place, that place of thriving. And from that place, literally change your life. And I think for both of us, that's what we figured out, not knowing what we were doing at the time, right? We had no clue, right? But we kept going, well, that feels good, so I'm going to do more of that. And that feels good, so I'm going to do more of that. And that really felt good. And I liked how my family came together after I did that. So I'm going to do more of that. I know it sounds very simplistic, but our body is part of our inner compass. And for me, at least, all I knew literally was how to live like this. Tension, headaches, the whole 9 yards, right? Because I was just conditioned to that. And once you start being like, there's a life on the other side of this is pretty fun. And the benefits that happen to the world around you when you start tapping into that and letting your body guide you are very profound. So I think your point there is very, it's a very pivotal point in the process. I think we both figured out inadvertently, but just like anything, if it feels good, it's probably going to serve you in a really good way.
Right. Yep.
So back to this for a second. When you talk about flow, what I also hear you talking about is this idea of decisions, putting yourself into flow. It's really you deciding your value system, right? Choosing who you surround yourself with. Can you talk a little bit more for me about how your values played into this process for you?
I think it's easy for us to think, for example, and I'll use again, a personal example. For me, I really held, being mother as a value, a place of value. I was and am, I shouldn't say was, I am extremely proud to be a mother of two amazing sons. And I think so often I thought I was placing that value first because I thought what they needed me to do is earn and to provide and to ensure that I could pay for their college or whatever that might be, right? And what was misrepresented to myself, what I misrepresented to myself was how important it might have been for me to be present at dinner instead of taking that work call, or to learn how to have joy on when we were spending time together versus having my brain racing in preoccupied thoughts about all the things I needed to do. And I think where that really hit home for me, Erica, is a few years ago, I was getting ready to get on a plane for work. And my husband asked me a great question. He said, if you didn't have to miss, your son's sophomore year, why would you? And that stuck with me. It was such a tough question, and I was frustrated at the time that he asked me that. But I thought it shouldn't have been an odd concept, but it was. What do you mean I don't have to? You mean I don't have to work like this? You mean that's an option? Like, I I thought all my value, I thought all my purpose, I thought all my 30 years was to accumulate into this job, this career, this everything. What do you mean that, what if I don't have to? Of course I have to, right? And that kind of sent me into a tailspin that has probably led to this latest phase of my journey, which is, I can bring value, I can create earning, I can make a difference, and it doesn't have to look the way it always did or the way it started.
So if you reflect now on your journey and your current state, tell me what voices you now hear in your head.
There's a lot of celebration going on. There's a lot of gratitude, time with friends, time with family, it's time with dogs. It's a special time, and also time to give back. I think it's an important time to give back and to lift others, and to help heal others and the world. I think we have to start with ourselves as well. So thank you. Thank you.
So just to reflect and put all this together for a second, what both Monica and I are saying is that being stuck is a part of growth, right? Mm-hmm. Being stuck is a part of evolution, because our primitive, primal, survival-based brain doesn't like it when we change. It doesn't like it when we take risk. It doesn't like it when we get on a plane and start to have the contemplation of, you mean I don't have to do this again next week? Because it's planning that next week you're going to be on that plane again, because that's how we stay safe. That's how we keep our identity together. That's how we make everyone else out in the world happy. So when we let ourselves take a step back for a minute and we let ourselves realize that all of us get stuck because we are all human. And if we recognize that fact, then we now have the ability to take our own power back and be able to decide what we want to do with that knowledge. So in that sense, tonight is a night of transformation, as Monica and I said. And you heard our stories and how we took our power back, bits by bit by bit, incremental steps, as it was said. And I want to go back to the question that we posed to you at the beginning of our discussion, which was, what is the opposite of being stuck? And the answers just kind of flew through the chat, and they were very big, expansive energy answers. Thriving, flow, free, freedom, right? We asked you that question for a reason, because that was your someday, your one day my life will never look, one day a year from now, my life won't look the same answer, right? That was what you are craving. So I want you to tap into that feeling for just a second and just let yourself honor that that feeling is available to you. And you can decide tonight, today, November 18th, that today's the day you decided to commit to that feeling, becoming more and more and more a part of your life. It was a gift given to you, right? It's a gift that your inner self, your deeper knowing, we like to say your future self, she offered that to you. Like, hey, here's your anchor. Here's your way forward. Here's your way out of survival mode. Tap into this feeling, tap into this vibration, and it will help you on your journey. So tonight we want to offer you this amazing space with these brilliant, beautiful, amazing women that are here with us tonight, that we can all collectively hold the energy for each other, that we can set an intention as we come from that place of freedom, of thriving, and we ask ourselves a very simple question. What is one small, incremental step I can do this week in the next 7 days for myself, for me? To use Monica's words, what is one decision I can make that will lay that new hardwire, that will decide I choose to not be in survival mode any longer? I choose me. I choose my dream, my way of life, my dream of feeling free and alive and thriving. If that question doesn't resonate with you, you could also flip the question around in a different way. What would be really fun to say that someday when the kids are at college, I'll get to do this. Someday when my schedule changes, I'm going to do this. Whatever that is, how can you bring a tiny piece of that? Just like when I said, someday I will have a practice where my staff all does yoga before we start seeing patients. And that equated to literally 5 minutes of yoga at 3:30 in the morning, right? What is your someday? What is your incremental step that will bring that energy of freedom, of thriving, of feeling alive into your current life now? So we are all here to hold witness for each other. We are all here to support that dream. And so we would love for you, if you want to declare that in the chat and get it out there into the world and make it known and make it solid and alive. It's there. If you want to write it down, that's an option too. But just like before, you're not allowed to do nothing. This is time for you to make a decision of what is the small thing you're going to do that will help move you forward and help you move in the direction of becoming unstuck. So if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat.
And then Erica, thank you. I think we have some questions too.
Okay.
So we can start to answer those while people are thinking. Let's see here. It is often difficult to reconcile your body with your spirit. Often we don't want to listen. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. That's sometimes an understatement. First of all, I'd like to say, I think the reconciling your body part, for many of us, we'll go with Overachievers Anonymous type people, we've turned our body off, because to push through what we've pushed through, you kind of have to turn your body off and tap into that brain and just go, right? Because inevitably there's painful times, there's difficult times. You know, for me personally, it's turning it off when I had to stay up for 36 hours straight, because you just turn your body off. So I do think there's a piece of this that the more we tap into our body, the more we listen to what feels good, the more our body starts to become alive again. That's one piece. The second piece is your body somewhat wants to listen, but your survival brain doesn't. Because sometimes what our spirit wants to do might not make everybody around us that usually likes us to show up in a certain way happy, right? Or we may have to say no to something. And so then the next part of that comes the anticipation of the response back, and then how we're going to feel when we have to say no, and that type of thing. So it is difficult to reconcile your body with your spirit, but the beautiful part about rewiring your brain is that you can do that even when you are not in the situation that you, the current situation, meaning you can practice having the conversations. You can practice how you want to show up. You can rehearse that in your mind. And that lays the hardwiring just as much as if you were having the actual conversation in real life. So it's kind of this really amazing super trick that you can do, that you can start laying some of that hardwiring, so that when you do go into a situation where your natural pre-programmed response would be tension or to back down or to give in, you've practiced that, which means you've laid that hardwiring so that you do have a little bit of, ground to stand on, so to speak. You have a foundation there, and that the brain doesn't automatically just tip directly back into survival mode, right? You've created that pathway that now the brain sees as more efficient.
That's awesome. Another question from Julie is, what does it mean when you say someone's body has a different vibration when someone isn't in survival mode?
So I'm just gonna use myself as an example. So for me, survival mode was living in a constant state of overwhelm and anxiety. Because as long as I was always worried about something, I was always doing something, right? So it kind of was like this cyclical loop, the hamster wheel, so to speak. So if you think about it, if I'm living in overwhelm, a very heightened state, my body is literally feeling a very different vibration, a different feeling, so to speak, than if I'm living, for example, in calm, in a relaxed state, right? Even just me saying the words makes my body change vibration, right? Even just a more simplistic way is you act different. Most humans act different when we feel happy versus when we feel sad, right? That would be like the polar opposite vibration kind of concept, right? So the point of the story there is to say that when we are having thoughts that drive a certain feeling, our body feels a certain way. I hope that answers the question for Julie. If not, let me know.
Okay. And then, oh, wow, we are getting such great ideas from others of what they're willing to do. Do you want to read some of them?
Baby steps towards a year from now, I won't recognize my life, is saying no to great opportunities to create a space for dream opportunities.
Oh, that's juicy. I love that. Dream.
That's like really tapping into freedom, right? And a space to sow those seeds that I might not reap anytime soon, i.e. Monica, right? There's a time to sow, and then there's a time to harvest, to reap. That is, because that really is the place of really having faith and trust that what comes to you is your truth, is your destiny, and it doesn't have to come immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Erica and Monica, someone asked about tips for making some of these changes doing this.
Joni, I don't.
Did you hear the question? Did you hear the question?
No, you were kind of frozen.
Okay, here. Okay, what the question was, could you share some tips or thoughts on making changes during this new time of new normal?
Yeah, I'll start with that, and that's a fair question, because as we acknowledge, it's been a tough year and continues to be, and there should be grace cards flying all over the place that we're giving to others and to ourselves, and just acknowledge that. I saw somebody put in the chat that they were going to meditate, and I think meditation is an amazing way and something that we can do right now in this new normal. To bring a sense of calm, to create a clearing, to also create great energy in the world. So I think that's one example of something in the new normal. And I think another one is, for me, I really love morning pages. And morning pages are just free writing, 3 pages every morning when I wake up before I do anything else, again, to create a clearing. And then when I go back and reflect on those, often some truths pop up that I might have been hiding from myself or not aware of. So those will be 2 tips I share. Erica, can you share a few?
So for me, this new normal has actually shown me how much I still wasn't taking care of myself. I mean, I'm a lot better, made a lot of headway, but it really showed me how I could do small things that really fill my cup. And so I was just reading the chat, and like Shannon's answer of, I just want to sit and read a book for fun. Right? In the middle of the afternoon, if you can, right? Like something that really is very simple, but really makes you feel like the world is just amazing for even 5 minutes. And that's what I think this new normal has offered to us, where it doesn't have to be push, achieve massive goals, which those are all wonderful. And there's a time and place for all of that. But when you let yourself really take amazing care of you, then you now have the energy and the foundation to go after those things. So it's kind of calling us in and saying, hey, you have nowhere else to go right now but with you. And what makes you happy? What is something small that would fill your cup? And I mean, it could be simple as, for me, it's really letting myself sit down and read a book with my daughter. I know that sounds so simple. And like you said, as a mother, that should be something that we do. But my default mode is to grind. And that is not my default. It's not to sit down. So for me, it offers this invitation of, hey, you feel really good when you read a children's book with your daughter. So I offer that I think we think that it has to be something, time, money, leaving our house, when actually sometimes the things that give us the most, to use the word bang for your buck, or the most, filling of your cup, so to speak, are right here within ourselves. And they're very simple.
And I like, along with that, I think it's Jane that said, say no to should and yes to want. That's beautiful, right? The should word comes out in spades when we're in a place of self-judgment. Bettina wrote, put on some uplifting music and dance. And I love that. Ellen Newhouse shared that last week with Revel 11, the power of dancing to shift energy.
That was fabulous. Erica and Monica, could you give us some last thoughts before we close tonight?
Erica, first.
Your last thoughts for this evening.
The last thoughts, I'll just tell you what comes to my mind first, is never doubt that those crazy ideas that you have could actually be your life and your path forward. And that you might not have them today, but even the journey of just leaning into that a little bit will shift your life in a way and make your daily life so fun. And it's not easy, but totally make the ride just incredible. So those are my last thoughts.
And for me, it goes back to an earlier.
That's beautiful.
I made. Yeah, thank you, Erica. Sorry. To me, it goes back to an earlier point I made about, who is the council in your head, and who are the community of individuals that you are surrounding yourself with. And I'm just extremely grateful to Joni and Monica Smith at Revel 11 and the team there for creating such a beautiful online space and community. There are so many great programs out right now, and I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and just allowing Erica and I a safe place to share a little bit about our journey. And hopefully you've walked away with some encouragement and ideas for how to continue your journey and feeling unstuck. Joni, any other comments?
That is so fabulous, both of you. Well, I would just say that I've taken away so many tips for this evening. And one in particular is that you can change that pathway. You can change your thinking in order to make things reality. And really whatever you want to create, you can. And, you know, one of the things that's been important to me in my journey of being unstuck and stuck is to visualize what my life is going to be. Like Monica, what you said about what I want to be in a year is different than where I am now, and visualizing what that looks like, and what you don't necessarily know the pathway to get there, but you know the direction. And I think that is so powerful. And I can't thank you both enough for sharing your stories, your ideas, and I know that I will go through tomorrow a different person because of tonight. And I think a lot of people will. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.